21 Grams is back, and welcome to the third iteration of our show. And in this iteration, we are offering a one-on-one interview with indie artists, and we're going to examine three very specific aspects of the creative soul. The cerebral, which will be all about the chess moves and deep thoughts that go into the aspects of the work and creating the work. The emotional, which will be all about the investment the artist has made in the work and creating it. And the practical, which will all be about the application of common practices, tropes, and ideas. In this episode, we welcome a familiar face in Jim Nettles. Jim is a speculative fiction author and also the dean at the business track at the Speculative Fiction Academy, owner of the Continual Convention, and of Author Essentials. That being said, I'm your host, Joe Compton, and let's get deep into it. Here now is a new episode of 21 Grams. Yes, hello everybody, welcome. We are live on Going Now and 21 Grams, and I mean, the man needs no introduction. I mean, I gave him a small one, but I mean, here now is one of my favorites on this planet, Mr. Jim Nettles. Are you ready to get deep, as Anita says hello? Are you ready to get deep into into your world, sir?
Well, you said we're live. I'm pretty sure I'm just kind of a Memorex of myself at this point, but sure, let's go for that. Let me try to pretend like I can sound intelligent.
Oh man, I wanted to kind of begin with the idea of, you and I suffer from the same affliction, I believe, and it's one that a lot of people suffer from, but it's one that we kind of self-inflict a lot in our own aspects, and that's we're so busy that the writing process kind of takes a backseat, and I'm kind of curious, when you get those itches, when you get those urges, and you have that opportunity to write, how you approach that, and what it is you do in your process to kind of get the most out of that when you have, because it probably doesn't come at the most opportune time, I would assume.
So it depends on what I'm working on, because I still do a lot of writing. I mean, every week I'm cranking out a fair amount. Not my norm. For the last 2 years of everything, it's not been anywhere near my normal kind of production, but some of that does fall to continual, and doing the shows we've been doing. Some of that falls to, a lot of it's been nonfic, stuff in the background. And there's a couple of, one of the things that I really have kind of been hitting through for the last, about year and change. I've gotten a lot of stuff drafted that I wasn't happy with. So it's sitting there and going through, and I'm like, all right, I got to pull this out, rewrite it, pull this out, rewrite it. I got a couple things right now that are under contract that are late. You love the sound of the whistling deadlines as they fly by your head. I got a couple other things that are promised or are contracted without deadlines right this second. I'm like, I'll tell you, we can have the deadline. And right now, the main thing I'm trying to get out and done is doing some space opera, hard space opera. It's not hard sci-fi, but it's hard space opera. It's either going to be 3 or 5. And this is going to be one of those I'm going to go shop again. It's been a while it's been a couple of years since I shopped anything. This is a series I think is commercial enough to go shop. And then when I get done with that, I've got to go finish up the other 2 projects that are contracted. And then I've got several things that are in the pipeline. And one of the nice things is in the last, as we were talking about before we came on, I mean, pretty much from about before St. Patrick's Day up until Dragon Con, I've had no free time at all, much of which was self-inflicted. But even so, I was still getting some words in every day. I mean, I drafted the first draft of the space opera. I sent it to a couple friends of mine going, okay, it's been a while since I've written this. how much of a hot mess is this really? I just need another set of eyes. And it was like, stories there, characters are there, and apparently my camera is going to want to be a pain in the ass tonight. Why is this? It has been working perfectly fine all day long. Um, and now it wants to throw tantrums.
Yeah.
There we go. So I don't know what's happened. But working on that story, and I've cranked out a couple of short pieces recently that I was able to get in that were for very specific purposes. So my head and the fiction side of me is really starting to crank back up again. Also, like we were talking about, I had a couple other changes going on that are taking off some of the constrict or restrictions and things like that I've been dealing with the last couple of years too. But for me, I'm usually, the problem is not having ideas. It's usually about what am I executing on and focusing enough to be working on it. When I'm running wide open, I'm usually writing 2 or 3 projects at a time. Sometimes as many as 5, but usually I'm trying to cut it down to at least working on 3 projects, usually two nonfiction, 1 fiction, or sometimes 2 fiction, 2 nonfiction, sometimes 2 fiction. Whatever. But
Writing's writing.
Yeah, and then I've got some stuff that's sitting there that's drafted, waiting for me to just kind of do the mental flush, then come back and do edits and refresh. Because if I'm cranking on kind of my usual schedule, I'm good for about 5,000 words a day around the rest of my schedule.
That's pretty awesome.
Right now, I'm doing about 2,500. So that's slow for what I've got to get caught up. But I'm happy with that because 3 months ago that word count was about 500 a day.
Yeah.
So it does not hurt my feelings to be ramping back up the head count. And in fact, of course, the great evil happened. We took a couple of days off a couple weeks ago and went on a short trip because we wanted to go see the Da Vinci exhibit at Biltmore. And sitting there after a couple of bottles of wine, all of a sudden the idea for, hey, this is good for a trilogy. I need to go write this so I can go pitch this. No, bad you.
Yeah, that's what it happens.
So yeah, sitting there over about 2 more glasses of wine, I arced it out, wrote out kind of the trilogy. I already have the story set. It's already set. Know the characters, know all the pieces, and it's probably going to be something I start working on later next year. Because usually if I get an idea like that, it'll sit and it'll bake in the back of my mind. And either I'll go, not that interested anymore, or it'll go, okay, it's still sitting there, so that's going to be the thing I work on.
Yeah. Is it often that you look at stuff and go, what the hell was I thinking about when I was thinking about this? A couple months down the road, you pick something and dust it off and you go, I don't know where my mind was at that time.
I obviously that happens. There are times that I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? And honestly, sometimes that's some of the better stuff.
Yeah, right.
Or at least the stuff that is,
or it tails off into something else, right? So
yeah, right now, one of the things I'm trying to pull together, originally I had set a deadline to launch it here as a part of October, is a collection of short stories and stuff I've written over the years that are all horror themed, that I was going to drop that. Oh yeah, that'll be great for a Halloween launch.
A little late for that, but
yeah, so I'm thankfully getting fiction really is starting to crank for me again, which is good.
It sounds like it starts with plot with you. Is that how it starts? Is you figure out a plot and then you kind of work characters and scenes into that and world build into that aspect, or is it different every time?
It depends. Some things start with, I see something, I'm like, oh, that'd be a fun idea. Other times it's, I see a character, something something like that. I hear a voice, I see a person, and you go, oh, that would be a fun thing to go, how do I screw with that idea? How do I go take and twist that person, that idea? Part of that great joy of having lived all the years I did on the road, airports, hotels, you see a lot of people, and sometimes you see them in very stressful situations. So you get to sit there and go, I have my cup of tea.
Yeah. I'm annotating in my brain right now what you're doing.
And but a lot of the time, and sometimes it's just the smart ass thought that comes to mind, and I'm like,
Sure.
oh, that'd be a fun idea. And everything gets caught somewhere, whether it's one of the notebooks, anything I look at seriously. I usually I've got an email account that is, I'm the only person with access to it. I will go through and email myself whatever notes I have at that given point in time. Sometimes it's characters, sometimes it's a story idea, sometimes it is oh, this could be a fun scene. Um, and sometimes it's no more than a couple of lines. Sometimes it can be pages and pages of, okay, this is something. And usually the longer things are the ones that become something real.
Mm. How much doing panels and the like and networking as much as you do, how much has that improved your process and how much do you uh contribute that to being able to write more words every time?
Hugely. I
Mm.
mean, I mean, my mother was an English teacher. I grew up, there's a lot of storytellers in my family. I
Mm.
mean, and I'm the shy, quiet one in my family. So, but going through what doing panels, what doing conventions, what doing continual, what all these things do for me is you get to hear other people's ideas. You
Yeah.
get to go ask that question that says, well, what about this? And occasionally I will slip one in because I'm trying to process an idea and go, I have no idea how the hell to fix this. That'd be a perfect question to throw in about now just to see what everybody else thinks. And sometimes you go and say, oh, that's a no, that fixes my problem. I can leverage that to fix my problem. But I mean, doing conventions, I mean, my favorite answer is it depends. Because whenever you ask a question, and a lot of time you'll hear me lead in with, yes, the answer is going to be it depends, but give me an answer. Um, because every situation is different, but every situation is the same. When you do enough panels, there's the programmed answers that come up because people ask
Right.
the same questions, or the same questions come from moderators and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's the 20% of things that are different, or maybe it's the same answer, but somebody says something slightly different and it registers a little bit differently for you. And I mean, this is when you do enough conventions and you see the same people, the same faces in the audience, you have conversations with people over and over and over again. Um, it really does become informative because sometimes it never hurts to go back to basics. I
Yeah.
mean, it's football season. There are times that you got to throw away the big playbook and go back to, okay, run it up the middle, run it up the
Mhm.
middle, run it up the middle, punt.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we can, now it's time to try a pass. Um, so it never hurts to go back to basics. It never hurts to look at the fundamentals and work on those, because no matter what, every production writer and creator I know will tell you, pay attention to the fundamentals first. And
Yeah.
this is one of those things I have a really bad habit of going and saying, okay, I've glazed over the fundamentals. I think I got a good idea. Let me go try to build a rocket. Okay, I didn't get a rocket, but the plane is still flying.
It may wobble, but
It doesn't, it's got two tail fins, two different ways, and it's flying in circles, but it's flying. It's good. We're okay. Everything's okay.
Is that where is that where you've developed the idea, the confidence to figure out what is shoppable too? Because you just mentioned this series you're working on, you're looking at shopping it. Do you feel like those relationships and that networking and doing those panels has kind of given you a good foundation as to, if I'm writing something, I know exactly where I'm aiming to put it out at?
It helps. I mean, because again, if you don't go and do a lot of conventions, I mean, having relationships with people helps, because
Yeah.
number one, you get a better idea of what are they really looking for. What's working in the marketplace right now. Just having gotten back from Dragon Con, sitting in the bar with friends that are editors, friends that are slush readers, friends that are publishers, friends that are in those spaces. Just because they're friends does not mean they're going to publish you. This is still the business side of things.
Yeah.
But having that relationship, does mean you'll get more than the first paragraph read. Or it means that you can get a little bit further in the process because they at least know you.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to admit this, but I mean, for a lot of publishers, especially mid cap and on, they're looking at this as very much a business. The first question is, can you sell books?
Yeah.
Because if you're selling books, then you're at least a serviceable writer.
Yeah.
And the things that I write purely because it's an idea, it's something I want to play with. It keeps my insanity in check, whatever the case may or may not be something I would go and try to twist commercially. But it's, if it's not great, it's still something that I may have a small audience that likes it. Because if you like a lot of my more indie stuff, the off the shelf kind of stuff, you're probably going to like a lot of it.
Yeah.
You're not going to like everything I write because I kind of do hit across the board. I write under a bunch of different names. I've written under a lot of names, but creativity is very important to me because I believe everyone needs to have a creative outlet. Doesn't mean you're trying to make money from it, but I believe firmly everyone needs to have a creative outlet because, I think you probably got the same message I did. But everybody needs to have that creative outlet. And for some of it's writing, or it's music, it's acting, it's film, or it may be cooking.
Yeah.
May gardening. It may be just sitting there and
throwing a big log for distance.
Gee, now that's more for my entertainment value, and because and it's not for distance. One of these days I'm gonna get you out, and at Multiverse, just go ahead and plan for it. You will be wearing a kilt. I don't want to hear about you. You will be. Just don't even ask.
Okay.
And as you and probably most everybody knows, I do a lot of weird shit.
Yeah, how much of you do you put in your writing? I mean, you write fantastical worlds. You write, and a lot of it is serious nomenclature in terms of the troping and putting it in a fantasy setting. I mean, it's not here's me and I'm just making fun of this. You do follow conventional formatting, writing prowess and everything like that. But how much of you do you like to leak in there? Is that something that is important to you?
Absolutely, because if it's not me going in there, it's gonna show up. I mean, absolutely, Anita, and I'll get the stuff to you about October Frights because I'm already working on the piece. But not to get derailed. Shiny objects. No, I mean, if it's something I'm doing that's under contract, because I've done stuff that was specific to universes, whatnot, where you didn't have so much flexibility.
Right. And you've done some probably technical things that are so boring and droll.
Not necessarily, because again, you still can work aspects of you, your ideas, your concepts. Even if somebody goes and says, your piece of the story is going to be this, you can do whatever you want to with the characters, but you're going to do this. And, here's where you start. Here's where you end. In those cases, you get a little bit of a challenge because you're playing in somebody else's sandbox, but when you're writing, it's still you coming through. But if you're writing in certain licensed properties, or you're writing in certain things like that, your writing style's got to kind of blend into how that universe works. But if it's me and my stuff, whether it is something I'm planning to take indie, whether it's something I'm going to go shop, if it's not me, I'm probably not going to enjoy writing it as much. And B, if I'm not putting me into it, then it's missing some of that essence. It's missing some of that spirit. It's missing some of that fun. And, hopefully if readers are reading my stuff, it's part of it is because they want my snark.
Hmm.
Um, or, they want some of the ideas I like to explore. They want, because again, I take a lot of often very serious ideas and topics.
Right.
I may throw it out there so I'm being flippant about it, but I'm really not.
Yeah.
It's I like playing with the language so it feels, I don't want to say safe or comfortable because a lot of the time it's not, but it feels it feels acceptable to address sometimes things that aren't comfortable.
Yeah.
It
Sure.
or things that you're like, okay, well, I never would have seen it that way, or I never would have thought about it that way. And if I'm doing that for at least one reader picking up my stuff, then I've kind of accomplished my job.
Yeah.
Because again, we go back to what I do and have done in the rest of my life also all feeds into it. Some of it is often looking and going, watching life, watching things that I do professionally, watching these other moving pieces, and thinking to myself, sometimes if I don't kill you on the page, I may have to get rid of the body. And so, but those creative aspects are extraordinarily important to me and are things that if I don't process them this way, I've got to find another way to do it. And writing for me is one of those things that is extraordinarily, it helps me process, it helps me think things through, it helps me decompress, it helps maintain my insanity. But I mean, it is a big mental health aspect for me as well to be able to express things that way, even if it's something that no one is ever going to see. I mean, a lot of years I wrote a lot of things, not necessarily anywhere near for publication, but because it was processing things that were going on,
Hmm.
or using that. So the fact that it's helped me refine my storytelling to do that is also good. But I mean, I am a firm believer that everyone both is a student and a teacher.
Nice. I love that.
And in that, because obviously there's a lot of weird anomalous shit that's in my head. I know this. This is the reason people come find me is I will talk about almost anything because probably at some point in time I've at least brushed up against it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Yeah.
And give me till midnight and I'll be an expert in particle physics. But at the same time, when I have these conversations, I also learn a great deal, whether it's what people say or what people ask.
Yeah, I think the biggest misnomer about you is you're an incredible listener. Actually, I mean, we've had deep conversations, and you've retained quite a bit of that before. So, I think I think people don't give you enough credit for that. So,
Well, that way they tell me things that they don't think I'll remember.
yeah, yeah. Interesting. You mentioned things that people won't see, and that aspect. The world building process for you in terms of putting the world like with the home summonings and that series, the winter trilogy that you put out, there had to have been quite a bit of world building, I would imagine, that you did there, but also you have a deep personal, family history. You have your Scottish background. You have all these different things that you are, have a rich history on. How much of that do you lean on with world building? Is it just silly not to use those things for you? Do you feel like that is just an area where you because you feel comfortable because you know it so well that you almost have to write in that kind of vein in that world?
Some things, I mean, because again, part of my misspent youth was not only business, not only technology, but also cultural anthropology.
Right.
I did a little field work. I've done some digs. And I've continued those studies throughout my entire life. One of my core fundamental drivers to everything is, why do people believe what they believe and why do they do what they do?
Interesting.
And so, yes, my family history. We actually know a lot of the family history going back to the 1400s.
Mhm.
You know, family has been here, going back to land grants. I mean, we've been here for a while. There's a lot of troublemakers in my family history. I recognize that's probably going to be a surprise. But and having grown up in the South, there are a lot of troublemakers in my family history. And some of that does show up. Sometimes it's family lore that is taken and twisted a little bit that shows up, or it is pieces from history I've studied, pieces from cultures I've studied.
Mm.
Um, you know, it, at the end of the day, one of the things that I really get challenged with is this. As we look at a lot of arguments today about cultural appropriation, as we look at a lot of arguments about, you know, how do how do we operate tribally? Because I mean, at the end of the day, we are a social animal. We are a tribal animal. We like to congregate amongst those people that we like, we trust, we resonate with because that's the way we're built. And for me, a lot of it is because I am friends with a lot of different, very diverse,
Sure.
very sometimes different groups. And, it's not necessarily, I don't have to think the same way they do. I don't have to believe the same way they do. There are times I will look and go, really? Really? Have you thought this through? Other times, other times it's a matter of somebody can make me reconsider my position. It doesn't mean that I'm going to change my thought, but at least I'm willing to go through and consider things. When I go into world building, when I go into storytelling, all of that flows in because it's without conflict, we don't grow as people. Without conflict, characters don't grow. There's the physical conflict of, well, my guy got his ass beat again.
Right.
Did he learn from that? Probably not, because I rarely do. But it's the other things that we go. It's the challenges we see. It's the opportunities where things don't go right. I was in a conversation earlier today where it was, if everything goes right, you're not trying hard enough.
Right.
Or you're not risking enough. And the things I learn from are when stuff doesn't go to plan.
Yeah.
If I try to do something and it doesn't work, I'm going to learn way more about that than if something miraculously just worked, exactly to plan. That's going to make me paranoid as hell every time. I want it to work reasonably close most of the time. But I also don't mind when things come and go and take a 90-degree turn and go, yeah, no, you thought it was going to go that way. It's not. And that's fine. One of the shirts that I saw as a t-shirt, and being a big fan and a big student of t-shirts, and the pithy slogans that go upon them, but this kind of feeds in again that stuff I was taught as a kid. Either I win or I learn.
Oh, nice.
And that's one of those things that when I live by that credo, life goes a whole lot easier.
Yeah, sure.
Now, am I pissed when I lose? Yes. But do I take the time to go and say, okay, why did something not work? Or why did somebody, was it somebody else just beat me? Cool, sweet. Was it because I beat myself or I didn't do the things I needed to be successful? Then that's when I look and go, okay, you were a dumbass, or, you might have overscheduled yourself occasionally, or we've talked about that.
Yeah.
But again, for me, it's the creative process. The whole thing is incredibly important to me. Even the parts I really hate, like going through and doing a lot of the painful editing sucks. I hate doing it, but it's part of the process. And it's one of those joyous parts when it's done. It's cathartic. It's just the actual process of sitting there and, trying to be the 11th monkey trying to write Shakespeare. Because number 12, he's over here banging out Othello all day long.
Yeah.
But, and looking at these things, I always, for me, it's always about what can I learn? What can I experience? And it hasn't always been that way for me, but I mean, that's kind of where I'm at these days is what can I learn? What can I experience? And if I have an opportunity to be of benefit to somebody, great, cool. Just buy the beer.
You mentioned that you're driven by you know the motivations of people, what they believe and who they are. What's been the toughest question for you to answer in that aspect? If you were when you were pursuing a story, which question or which belief have you had the hardest time answering?
Fundamentalism of any type, because I have a hard time not treating a fundamentalist, even if they're my hero, because I that for me has always been a personal challenge. If you were so rock solid in an idea, a faith, a tenet, whatever it is, that you're not willing to
Mm,
question it, then you're wrong.
yeah.
And there are times that I need to create that character because that belief is their strength,
Hmm.
but do it in a way that at the end of the day, is not the snark that goes in my head, which is also if you were that rock solid in belief, it's not about having faith. It's not about having belief. It is a matter of when you become so idealized, so fundamental in that belief that you cannot see other options and you can't respect anybody else's belief systems, that I have a problem.
Mm, yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, I was thinking, when you're saying that, the best and most incredibly engaging conversations I've ever had, especially about fundamentalism, is with theologists and people of faith. Like reverends and ministers. And the higher up, the more intellectual
The
it becomes, the more conceptual of the doubt creeps in a lot higher for those folks, which is incredibly just humbling and interesting because you would assume that they are as rock solid as rock can get, and it's not the case with a lot of them. They do a lot of you know studying other religions and other beliefs, and that until I think that's when the doubt starts to creep for them, when they start to realize how closely related all that is.
See, and this is one of those things that I really like discussing.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of faith, or a lot of conversations with a multitude of theologians and a multitude of faiths. And having grown up as a good little Catholic boy in the South, I was a unicorn to start with. Okay. Um, having grown up where my mother's mother was Methodist, my mother's father was Presbyterian, she became
Jeez.
Presbyterian.
Oh my gosh.
My father's father was Southern Baptist, my father's
Oh
mother was Catholic because she
god.
came down from Wisconsin. So all the kids got raised Catholic. So I mean, when you throw in this thing, and I remember having a conversation as a child with mom going, um, what flavor's right? And she's like, it's fine. It'll be fine. Quit harassing the nuns. And because even at a young age, I would kind of look and go and say, really?
Yeah.
Really? Then my mother would get a call. And but having had conversations with, you're exactly right. In my experience, the higher you go up in the food chain,
Mhm,
the more studied someone is, the
mhm.
more time they spend studying not only, and I'm not talking about just from a religious system, I'm talking
No.
politics,
Yeah.
financial systems.
Yeah.
Everything has its dogmatic people that
Yeah.
absolutely can't see anything another way.
Yeah.
And when you can't see things any other way, or consider that something may be nuanced, even if you were so rock solid in that belief, go with God and don't
Good
bitch when you get slapped upside the head by a surprise.
one. Yeah, it's very interesting. You know, there's just it becomes. I'm wondering how much of today's society creeps into a lot of artists' thought process because we're so polarized and we're so on one side or the other. And I'm uh, as I'm doing these things, and a lot of times when I'm doing like documentary, when I'm talking to documentary filmmakers, or they have one side that they're on with this, and for me, searching for the other side is interesting as hearing their side of it. But and I always ask them how much they went into the other side and check that out. And a lot of the I'm so always surprised how much they do that. But it is so polarizing now, so it's really hard to there's it's you want as you said, you have so many diverse different friend groups and things like that. You want that to be more prevalent, and and as an artist, there's a responsibility to maybe do that, and that we feel that maybe other people don't feel.
Well, one of the things you learn in debate is you have to be able to argue both sides,
Yeah,
regardless what your personal feelings are, regardless what your beliefs are. You almost have to take that view of being the attorney
yeah,
of here's the facts and here's the possibilities. And if you can at least vocalize and understand the opposing view, you can then have a reasoned conversation. And
yeah,
for me, that's a lot of the pain of where we're at is not being willing to have that conversation. And I've got friends on both sides that are like, why do I want to talk to them about it? Why do I want to do this? I'm like, and ultimately, what we see is that those two sides that are the most opposed will ultimately meet in the middle, and that's never pretty.
yeah,
History shows this.
yeah. That's true. I
So as an artist, and one of the things we did a show fairly early on in Continual called "When is Art Political?"
mm,
And the answer is when is it
oh,
not?
yeah.
Um, you know, I think I mentioned we went to the Da Vinci exhibit, which and seeing the artwork and seeing pieces that even I've seen many, many times, whether it was, Mona Lisa, Sistine Chapel, some of these kinds of paintings, or if you're looking at the sketches of weapons of war and ideas and technological ideas, every ounce of that has that ability to look at both sides. What's the at that time what would have been called the natural order? You know,
Mhm.
studying the idea of birds for flight. Yeah, that corkscrew helicopter is not quite going to work with the guy cranking at the bottom, but
Yeah,
the fundamental principles or the concepts are there of watching and seeing how things operate around us and being able to do that. All of that's going to fall into the work. And so one of the things that when you're telling a story, one of the hardest things from sometimes as a both a storyteller and a reader is to not think that the story I told or a character's viewpoint is something I believe.
mm,
But if I'm telling you what that character believes and why, that means it's not my belief. What that means is that's what that character needed to believe in that story for this to work.
yeah,
And this is one of the things in terms of storytelling and world building and looking at ideas of what makes cultures similar as well or what are their differences. Because if you study cultures enough, you're going to find 85% of it's the same across the board. They may call it something different, but the purpose to the society is there. The fundamental tenet, the idea is there. The belief system is there. The political system is there. There's some sort of order to it to maintain how the society works. And if that's not there, you don't have a society.
yeah,
Yes, what this group calls it may be different from that group, and this is true across the board, whether you're talking religion, political systems, financial system, all these sorts of things. It's a system. How you label it often is not as important as what are the tenets and the ideas of the system, and
Nice.
understanding that, and then looking and saying, okay, well, the things that are different from my belief systems, how is that important to me, and how does that affect me? Oh, it doesn't affect me.
Mm.
Rock on, you know. Or if because most of the time it's not going to, up until the point in time where it does, and that's where the conflict happens. That's where, as the old saying goes, your right to swing that arm back and forth ends at the tip of my nose. Actually, for me, it's going to end a little bit before that, or but again, I throw heavy logs.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I'm curious with your vast knowledge of history and everything like that. Are you often more optimistic or pessimistic in your approach? And does your writing reflect that
yes.
viewpoint?
So when I'm writing stories, typically I have the short view. Um, Sometimes the short view can be optimistic, but if you're writing horror, if you're writing urban fantasy, even a lot of sci-fi, it's not about being optimistic. You're like, good God, I'm
Yeah,
about to die. The question is how messy and who's going to find the body. Oh
right.
shit, I survived. I didn't plan for this. What do I do now? Um, but when you look at things from a longer view, I'm generally optimistic up until the point where the sun explodes and we're all turned to cinders. But before then, we'll have discovered warp drive, or somebody will have decided, yeah, we're still getting off the planet. But um, generally, in longer cycles, I am optimistic
Mhm.
because cycles happen. You can't ride the up train forever. There are always going to be those periods of challenges. And it is in periods of conflict where the greatest innovation and the greatest opportunities come up.
Yeah.
It's not when everything's easy and money's flowing and everybody's happy and everything's good. Okay, great. If we look at technology, if we look at social media and the way some of that stuff's come about over the last, 20 years, one could argue this is a huge leap forward in people in society. I would also argue, and I frequently do, that this is the downfall of society for social media. And because we have the ability now and tools to do exactly what we're sitting here and doing. If it
Yeah.
wasn't for this, you and I wouldn't be friends.
Yeah.
We wouldn't talk, we wouldn't hang out, we wouldn't do some of the stuff we do with it. At the same time, it has often shown itself to be very destructive.
Right.
If we look at how people can gain access to information and knowledge at, in essence, free. Yes, there's cost of software, hardware in it, but I mean, in terms of relative cost to history and ease of use, with this little device, I have more than the Library of Alexandria. There's more on my Kindle here than the Library of Alexandria would have held at the
Mhm.
time. So the notions of I can't find out, I can't learn it is
Yeah.
bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, but it's, are you willing to put in the time, the effort, and the work? And that goes into everything else, because again, a lot of the time there's topics that I know just enough to be dangerous and a little bit more. And what's important there is I often know what question to ask. It's not that I have the answer, it's I know what question to ask to then get me the answer.
Mhm.
And there are times where it's like, yeah, I vaguely remember that. Let me go still pull up the repository of all knowledge, because I remember the question to ask, not the answer.
Hi, Lily.
Hey,
Yes.
Lily.
Yeah, be curious. Don't be judgmental, right?
Always, you can be judgmental, but understand that's a road that goes both
Yeah.
ways. Always be curious. I mean, always be questioning things. Always be looking. Doesn't mean you've got to, because sometimes you're just going to stumble across something that it may confirm what you are
Yeah.
interested in or believe or think or whatever else, and it may go against it. And
Yeah.
having been somebody who's written in political media on both sides, I can tell you I can use language to give you the exact same facts, but give confirmation bias to either side that I want to. And we see that in media every day.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that, because I'll go and give a talk on one side of the room about how social media is evil, privacy, data security, blah, 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 blah. The world's going to end. Then I'll walk across the other side of the hall and go say, yep, here's how you use social media to promote yourself, your work. Here's how you connect with people. Here's how you network with people. And they will come in and go and say, wait, that was the exact opposites. And I'm like, no, it wasn't. I gave the exact same data. I gave the same information, and
Just
fundamentally
packaged it
it's act with intention and act with knowledge.
Yeah.
And the hard part sometimes is not to act with emotion, because I have been upon occasion accused of being a heartless bastard, and I'm not.
Which leads me perfectly into my next question that I had for you, which is, what emotion do you draw upon most when you're writing? What do you, I mean, as somebody who has been labeled an emotionless bastard, what do you feel like you're right? What emotion do you like to express in your writing? Do you, is it, did you like going on that ride emotionally?
Fear, doubt,
Really?
joy. Yeah, I mean, it's the things that make us question. That's the stuff I enjoy most in writing, is because everybody, no matter what level of confidence you see them project, with the exception of certain psychological conditions like narcissism, but most people learn. Most people that appear to have that level of confidence and level of swagger or whatever else that you see, it's because they've become comfortable with their doubts and the questions that they ask.
Ah,
They've
interesting.
become comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Mm,
And that's a lot of the things that I like to explore, because again, that was one of those things that for me was part of the journey. When at fairly young age, I was managing people that were twice my age for very large dollar projects and carrying a lot of responsibility. Sometimes shit did not work quite like it was planned. And, a lot of the things that I've done in my life are not about creating the plan to know that it's going to work exactly like this. It's creating the bumpers in life that say, okay, well, as long as I don't go outside of these, it'll be fine. And it's when you go outside of those, you're like, well, shit, because sometimes things happen and you go
mhm.
outside of those bumpers. We were talking about that. I didn't do an event this past weekend because knees foobar, both Achilles are kind of still trying to heal from stupidity. It was my own stupidity. And, so therefore, I've still not learned from certain mistakes. I'm going to continue to repeat them because there are certain things I'm willing to endure the pain for whatever that benefit is, because I want to
Sure.
be somewhere. There's something I want to do. There's, things along those lines. But that for me is really a lot of the thing that's important, because it is, how does a person look at what they're afraid of?
Mm,
And a lot of the time, the things we're afraid of that we don't want to admit are not, I'm going to fail, because that little monster's in the back of your head all the time going and saying, oh, yeah, you're going to fail. You're going to fail. You're going to fail. Nobody's going to read this. Nobody's going to buy this. Nobody's going to care about the show. Nobody's going to. Why are you doing this? Why are you spending all the hours on this? Why are you spending all the time, the money? Why are you doing all the conventions? Why? Because there's always that doubt tickling at the back of your mind. It
yeah.
is well, okay, how do I deal with fear, doubt, things along those lines, and continue to do what I do? Well, again, there are times that there are things that happen in life. There is great joy. There is, great happiness. There are just tremendous experiences in life. There are great things that happen. There's also shit happens. There's grief. There's pain. There's all these other things. The question
Yeah.
is, which one do you let control you? And that's one of the things that if you read a lot of my stuff, that's what a lot of it's about, is about that idea of what are my internal fears and doubts, and how do I confront those and ultimately go for success. Sometimes, for example, I've got some characters, it's like they always make the assumption they're going to win until they don't, until they go and say, well, I am sitting in a deep dark hole with no way out, and everything's just gone to shit. The one hope I just had called and said, yeah, I can be there next Tuesday. I'm screwed. You know, we have that idea of the dark night of the soul in story because it's something everybody can relate to.
Yeah.
Every one of us has sat in the dark and gone, well, shit, or worse.
Yeah.
And I mean, we talk about 3-act structure. We talk about the arcs that go on. Do you know why that works? Because it mirrors a lot of the way life experience goes.
Yeah.
Is we're just sitting there going, sipping my tea.
Yeah.
And, something happens. You get an opportunity to go do something. You get the lift, and then something happens. And you're like, well, the world's going to end. Oh, the world didn't end. Oh shit, the world didn't end. Yeah.
All right, I guess I got to put my pants back on.
That's no. I'm gonna teach you about kilt life. I'm gonna get you to dress like a man.
Yes, that'll be fun. In terms of putting stuff out there and making it happen, are are you more confident now than you've ever been with your own process, or do you feel like there's still things that you're exploring and trying to figure out?
Every single day. Some of it's my stuff. I mean, because obviously we do, I do not only my stuff, but we also do stuff for other
Yeah.
people as well.
Yeah.
So there are times, that, and some of it's just consulting. Some of it is, okay, we're publishing for somebody else. Some of it is, other things. Every single day, there is something to be learned. There's something new to be tried. Sometimes there's something new to be tried because of how do we do the next book marketing thing. Sometimes it is, how can I tell the story differently that works better? Sometimes it's the, wow, that's a cardboard character. Do I really need them, or do I really want to go through the work to rewrite them? Can I just kill them off and put their snarky lines to somebody else?
Yeah.
No, I mean, this is again, this is one of those things that for me in life is, it's always about continuing to learn, because if I'm not, then that means I'm not pushing hard enough. It means I'm not looking and saying, what's the next opportunity? Because the one thing for me, and again, this is one of those things that wasn't always the case, but realistically, for me at this point, it's when I'm old and creaky and laying on the deathbed next week, would I rather say, damn, I'm glad I watched more TV, or would I rather go and say, that knee hurts like hell, but there's a good story behind that.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Because a friend of mine his line used to be, well, what are they going to do, eat you? Okay, no, then move on. If something's not going to kill you,
Yeah.
then fine, you can learn from it. You may have made an ass of yourself. I've made an entire career out of making an ass of myself. And ass forward. But this is one of those things when I talk to a lot of people, that are going and saying, well, I'm afraid of X. I'm like, what are you afraid of? That friends are going to give you shit? Your family's not going to support you? That, if you do something, if you write about X, that somebody's going to go and give you a bunch of shit for it? Okay. What's more important? Doing what you feel creatively driven to do. If you're not, and I mean, one of the hardest things to do and deal with is to have those friends and family around you that support you, even if they're giving you shit about it. The ones that support you, or at least aren't holding you down.
Mm.
One of the things that is a hard lesson for a lot of people, and this is a conversation I got into at Dragon Con, and this is true not just in writers and creative space. This is one of those things that we deal with a lot of the time with entrepreneurs and business owners and people that are going out to go start stuff. And by the way, yeah, if you're a writer, you own a business. You
Yep.
need to treat some of it that way. Is the idea that so often your support structure you have, your friends, your family, inwardly don't necessarily want to see you succeed because not because of you, but because of what they haven't done. They'd rather sit on the couch and watch, Golden Girls reruns than get their ass off the couch and, do whatever it is that they wish they'd done when they were 15
Yeah.
or 20 or 30. And because of that, it's their fear that projects onto you. And we then have an option as to whether or not we take that in ourselves. And it's hard thing to do to look at family and go and say, well, I'm going to go do this, or friends. If it's your circle of friends you've known for forever, and they're like, oh man, why are you doing that? Why are you wasting your time on this? Why are you wasting your time on that? Well, because it's important to me. You don't have to give a shit about it. You can either be supportive or you can shut the hell up. And I've told friends this. I've told some family that, where you look and it's like, you don't have to like it. You don't have to support it. You don't have to do anything about it. I just don't want to hear about it. You can either smile, nod, and say, rock on. You can, or just don't say anything. And when you've got people that are so ardent to be destructive about what you're trying to do and trying to create, then becomes the real hard part, which is more valuable to you. Because if somebody is being that destructive in your life, I don't care if they're blood or not. If somebody really is being that destructive, you have to make that decision on what's that boundary and are they going to continue to be in your life or not?
Mm.
Because at the end of the day, the only person you're responsible for, number one, is yourself. And then number two, kids and parents to an extent.
Yeah.
Even those have their limits.
Yeah.
Beyond that, if you've got little kids, please feed them. Please take care of those basic needs.
Yeah.
But if you are somebody who your kids are adults and your parent, everybody in your life, they're adults, then they're grown ass adults and they can be supportive or not. And if they're not, and we've seen, especially as you kind of were alluding to, as divisive as everything has gotten over the last number of years, it's if those people are not going to be supportive for you there, then the question has to become, is your own sanity, is your own happiness worth sacrificing to contribute to somebody else's misery?
Mm.
Because most of the time it's somebody else's misery is the reason you're sitting there and dealing with their bullshit.
Yeah.
And again, that's one of those hard lessons to learn. I mean,
yeah. Well, I think you've taught us a lot tonight. I think you've really, I really appreciate you coming on and opening up and just diving deep. It's been a wonderful conversation as always, and we're up against it. So tell everybody where they can check out what you're doing and how you're doing it.
well, you can get to most everything right now through jamespnettles.com. As most of the sites I'm going to be talking about here in a minute, I'm rebuilding it because we migrated stuff to a new platform and I'm still building. But you can get to everything from jamespnettles.com. So I am the founder for Author Essentials, which is services and a workshop company. Primarily, most everything we're doing is workshops. I've got several new workshops that'll be rolling out here. Was hoping one of them was going to be ready and done before we went to multiverse, but it's going to probably be right after multiverse where the author business plan is coming out. Holiday marketing is also coming out in early November. Intellectual property is probably going to drop in January, and then hopefully we'll actually be back on track. And so that's going to be available through authoressentialsworkshops.com. Also on the workshop site, there's several more people that I'm signing contracts with that are going to be coming in teaching some classes.
Nice.
A lot of this is also going to be available over at the Fic Academy, the Speculative Fiction Academy, where I am the business dean. We Before I get there, one of the things that I am currently working on, and if anybody is interested in it, drop me a note. We are looking at planning an in-person small retreat and workshop next fall, which is going to be geared around the writing and publishing business. It's going to be around the business side of stuff. So right now we're already working and planning on doing that. Originally, this was supposed to have happened in spring of 2021. For some weird reason, that didn't happen. But I'm also the dean over at the Speculative Fiction Academy, business dean over there. We have some of those classes, or at least portions of those classes, are also going to be over at the Spec Fic Academy. I am also the VP and tech director and one of the founders for the Continual Convention, along with Gail Martin, and we roped in some other friends and stuff along the way. We're right now I am hosting 3 shows. I've got a couple of new ones that'll be coming out, but of course, we invite everybody to come check out continualconvention.com, where we're roping Joe into more and more shows. And at some point, we're going to do some evil crossover stuff between Continual and
Yes.
Go
Yeah, we
Indie.
keep talking about that. We need to do that for sure.
And beyond that, there are a couple of other things that are in the works for next year.
Awesome.
And so hopefully Joe will let me come back on and play again to talk more
Of
about those
course.
as well. But
Well, hopefully, this space opera thing happens and soon, and we can talk about that as well, because that sounds very interesting. So
it's a fun one. It's one of those things that I'm going to be very happy to get it into the "and it's been written" category, and it's been published, but because that's always the fun part of it. But right now I'm working on books 2 and 3 in the Business Essentials for Writers series. So at least one of those will be out in the spring, and the other one I'm shooting to have out next fall.
nice. Awesome.
As well as some of the more workshops and things like that. Some of the things that were originally slated to come out as books are just going to come out as workshops with workbooks. Either because it's not long enough, or it changes too frequently to be worth doing the book. Or pieces of those are going to wind up in some future books and releases as well.
Nice.
And so yeah, I might be involved in a couple of other things too, but I can't talk about them.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about them when we can. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. And remember that it's always time to go indie now. And we've got a lot of great stuff coming up. So check us out. Like, subscribe, and do all those wonderful things you do. And we'll see you again soon.